Steve Thurman here at the Bitcoin Conference 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee. This is day 2, I guess, technically, of the conference. First day of general admission, a lot more people here. We got a few minutes here with Chris Groshong of Coinstructive. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And
Nailed it.
Nailed it. All
First try, no retakes.
That's right. Yeah, it's one I always have to think about before I say, am I saying it? Okay, Coinstructive, we got it. Talk to us a little bit about your company, what you do in this space, but bring us back. Let's go ahead and get some back history here on how you got involved in crypto and Bitcoin in general.
All right, so yeah, you want the origin?
Yeah,
some of the origin
give us the origin.
story?
Yeah.
Okay,
the short version, the cliff notes.
The short version. Otherwise, this will be the whole interview, right?
Right.
So, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I saw the internet come up, right? Like I saw that start, and when I found out about Bitcoin in like 2012, and really when it clicked in 2013, and I realized you couldn't turn it off, I was like, oh crap, this is how innovation spurs, right? When you have something that can't turn off, like the internet, people will build around it. And you know, when I saw the internet coming up, there was 2 choices for me at that time. This was like 15 or 16 years old when I was like, I felt like I had this decision in front of me of like what path I wanted to take. It was Human Genome Project and like all the developments that were going to come out of that whole field of science. And I love genetics. So that's what I ended up doing, because I also wanted something that was stable, right? Like high tech. Those guys were changing jobs every 18 months, 2 years, like climbing a ladder and jumping jobs. And it seemed very chaotic, right? But when I found Bitcoin, I was like, I am not going to let something as big as like the internet like pass me by again. Because imagine if you could invest in a little piece of the internet, right? And that's what I'm like, okay, this is the opportunity to change as many lives or more lives if you can fix money than I could if I was staying in the pharma industry, right? And I knew that industry was not going, well, one, I didn't enjoy that field of work anymore because of how the pharma industry is run. When you're in college, they don't tell you how the industry you're going into is actually run, right? And it's all lobbying and, right, it's all a political game. And when they started asking us to donate money to their PAC so they could go back to Washington, and I'm like, the company I worked for at the time was making $9 billion a year.
Wow.
And they needed their employees to give money back so they could go to DC to lobby. I'm like, money is broken, right? Absolutely. So, and that's why I got into crypto, because I figured I could help as many or more people than I would if I stayed in the pharma industry. So let's save some lives by using crypto.
Absolutely. So the progression from there to Coinstructive, first of all, how long has Coinstructive been a thing?
Coinstructive was established in 2015, actually, and the business models have changed significantly because, as you can imagine, for somebody who actually worked in the lab, so like my job, I have a degree in genetics, and I was a biochemist per se, and molecular biologist. We grew cells that had proteins in them that we purified and then crystallized to actually get the 3-dimensional structure of the molecule. Wow. Right? That then the chemists or whatever would design a molecule to fit into that binding pocket to either render that protein useless, right? Or make it become active, right? And that's the medicine that you take. So it's like the early stages of drug discovery, and it was building like the puzzle box, right? So that you could put the puzzle together. And I enjoyed it for a while, but it just didn't have a lot of relatable or transferable skills from biotech to fintech. They're just, at least for my career. So I just knew, like, I'm so early, 2013, 2014, right? Like my first conference was in June of 2014 in San Francisco. Wow. Bitcoin only. Right? That's all there was. There was no crypto. It was just Bitcoin. Right. And I realized that if I just put in all my hard time and energy into this, like I would if I was going back to get a second degree, right? It would have to be nights and weekends while you still worked. People do that all the time. They go back to school, they have a second job. Like, so I just put all my free time into going to events, learning, talking to people on Twitter, because that's all it was.
Right.
Right. And I figured eventually I'll be able to find something that fits. And either like the education stuff didn't work out. That's what we started doing. And then I was doing consulting with business consulting back when like the ICO days were coming, and I turned down so many projects, and like some of them, those people went to jail, which is great.
Wow.
Made some good decisions, right? But that was a tough time of the industry too, and I didn't have anything that really worked until about the end of 2019, almost like going right into the pandemic.
So you're 4 years into this, finding your way with Coinstructive.
Yeah, through 2 like basically failed business models and 2 bear markets.
Keeping the name through,
yeah,
through
keep the name through everything. And at one point went back down just to me. And I was doing continuing education for law enforcement, banking compliance, and attorneys. And it didn't really work out either, but for some reason, the company that I was partnering with for tools to train law enforcement how to do investigation work, which never even took off, they started referring victims to me, and then I actually turned that into a business model, and that's how I started doing investigation work. And there were other companies out there doing investigation work, and I realized, because the first rule in crypto early on was if you send it to the wrong address or somebody like that you don't know, or you met, like, it's gone. There's no getting it back.
Yep.
The first person they did to me, I'm like, sorry, man, it's gone. There's nothing we can do.
Yep.
Right. And then the second person, and I'm like, why are they doing this? And I'm like, well, maybe it's not gone, because sometimes it ends up places that can be frozen or subpoena or whatever. Like, sometimes things can actually be recovered. So let's come up with a way that like at least gets people more information, because a lot of people, what I realized is they need closure, right? Because when you lose something and you made a mistake, you gotta remember there's all the psychological stuff going on now.
Sure.
Right? Like, I just messed up. I'm such an idiot. And they're just like, they want to smack their head against the wall. And you realize they want to know what happened. Where did it go?
Yep.
Right? And they don't know how to use those tools. And even the public ones are not always very good, or at least they weren't back in the day. And so you start to realize, if you can tell somebody just what happened, right, that goes a long way with the steps to a recovery.
Sure.
Both mentally, right, and maybe financially in the future. But the point being, like, you gotta kind of get into the head of where victims are coming from a little bit, and to understand how to really serve them, right? And so as you start doing the work, you start to see like what is important to them and what they really need in order to like I call it recover. But I think one of the important things is when you're doing this work with victims and you're talking to victims, is to let them like have a voice, because they feel like they're alone, a lot of them, right? Because they've isolated themselves. They feel like a lot of people don't report, and so it becomes kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy of like they just lock themselves into these negative thought patterns, right? So so part of the goal is to help people move past all of that. And so investigation work is something that I really enjoy, because you get to work with people, right? You get to try to help them. And hopefully, if you do a good job, you don't ever have a repeat customer.
Right. What does a typical case look like? Walk me through a day in your life.
So the important, well, let me rephrase that. So there's a lot of different types of scams. But the 2 biggest ones are usually some sort of, I met someone online. And you can go to like forums and Reddit, and they'll be like, here's the top 4 things. If these things happened, you are probably like 99% chance of being scammed, right? And it's things like, met somebody online, Then our conversation moved to WhatsApp or Telegram. Then they said, don't send me the money. They said, send the money to this place because you can make money just like I did. And they teach you how to make money, right? So a lot of it is the scammers are building slow confidence, either through romantic dating sites, right? Or through business type relationships like LinkedIn. And they're just phishing. And some of it's spear phishing, like targeted, because they know specific individuals are either wealthy or are in a field where they're connected to other wealthy individuals, or they definitely have crypto. So it's, the victims really need some sort of place where they can go, right, to like get honest answers about what actually happens in the process. As most people don't even understand, like, what is crypto recovery even about? They just end up going in a circle and getting trying to find somebody online to get help. And
then they're victims of recovery scams as well in that process often.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the double whammy.
Right. Which is, so that's one of the other big scam types, right? So you get scammed the first time, mostly through like this fake exchange type of a situation that usually starts out through like a dating site or something like that. And then miraculously, people start contacting you to see if you need help with recovering your crypto. Isn't that curious how they just seem to know that you needed help at this particular moment in your life? So really you're looking at, those are probably the two biggest types of scams, right?
What does it look like under the hood? So somebody calls you, humbles themselves in the process of pouring out their heart in a stressful situation, and I'm sure you've seen them from the small and petty to the large. What does it look like under the hood? What do you immediately start doing after that first point of contact?
Well, you got to gather all the correct information. So a lot of people are unorganized, or they're also in a state of they're dealing with the trauma of the situation. And so when you're in that, you end up with like you're looking through a pinhole, right? Like you got blinders on, you can't see anything except for like this few small things that you're focusing on. And so when you ask people for like, I need transaction IDs, right? And they're like, depending on their level of knowledge, right? It's across the board. They're like, yeah, I'll get you those. Or I already started putting them together. I have a list of them. They're in a spreadsheet. Great. They're like, what are those?
Yeah, right.
What is a transaction ID? I don't even know what that is, or where to get them. So then you have to like walk people through. Some people only do stuff on their phone, and they don't realize to go and get your transaction ID history and down, like all your withdrawals or deposits, you have to actually go online and log in, and like there's more functionality through the online platform desktop site than there is through the mobile app. And they're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, you got to do this and you got to go here. So that's part of the reason why the recovery scams are so successful, is because people know now enough about crypto to get themselves in trouble.
Yep. Because
it's more mainstream, right? And everybody knows you can make money, right? That's why there's also airdrop scams now, right? On the other side, where there's virtual machines that are processing smart contracts, right? Like those are, people are airdropping tokens because people think, oh, free money. And then there's a malicious code in there that's like a wallet drainer. And then all of a sudden I'm getting free money. And then your wallet disappears.
Horrific.
Right? So this is the world we live in. Like nothing is for free, right? And the days of early crypto being like free money, that's not here anymore.
Right.
So, but people think they know what they're talking about. And so then those recovery companies gives them like fake reports. They don't even know how to go online and look at a block explorer to see if the data in the report is actually even accurate. or make sense. Like some of the reports I've seen from the scam companies, they're referencing transactions that happened before the victim sent the money to the scammer in the first place. So it can't even be part of the money flow.
Wow.
It's not even their money. It's another scam victim's money probably, but it's not their money.
It gets convoluted quick.
Yeah, and people don't know how to tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to, like, for when people come to me finally, or my team, they really don't trust us because they've already been scammed twice.
Right.
Right?
Gun shy.
But so part of the way we do our investigations, which I think has really helped people, right? Because I mentioned, like, people need the closure. They want to know what happened. We do our investigations. It's very synonymous to car repair, and people are like, mechanics, car repair. But if you think about it, it makes sense, because if your car's making some weird noise or leaking fluid and you're not a mechanic, you're going to take it to the shop. And if it's a legit shop, they're going to be like, we need an hour or two to figure out what it is that's going wrong with your car. And they charge you for that. It's not free, right? But a lot of these blockchain forensics companies would just be like, we need $5,000-$10,000 to get started. Right? But if you drove up to the mechanic and he was like, without opening the hood, was like, transmission, $7,000, and you'd be like, hold on, I'm going down the street. That doesn't sound right. You didn't even look. How do you know? But in crypto, people don't know how to ask the questions to even question what someone's doing. They think, oh, this is a recovery company. I need help getting my money back. If I get my money back, it fixes all my problems. But if you were in a relationship, the damage is already done. Like the spouse, you've taken the money out of the shared account, or you've been hiding this from your spouse. Then the children are like, and then it affects your job and like all these things. Like that's not going away just because you get the money back.
Right.
Right. So there's this misconception of recover the money, it fixes my problems. It doesn't work that way. So you need to tell people, like in stages, like what their chances are of recovery. So by giving them this, hey, we need an estimate to find out how bad it is, because there's really three options that come out of an investigation, and what we call our initial analysis, which is like doing an estimate. You're looking at, are the funds recoverable? So did they go someplace where you can subpoena, freeze, issue a warrant and get those funds back? Right? Like a US based exchange is one of your best options. Then there's the bad, which is not really as bad as it may sound, but there's no guarantee. And even with the U.S. exchange, there's no guarantee of getting money back. But you're less likely to get money back if it's going to like a Chinese exchange that won't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. But if you have something like a tumbler or a mixer and you feel like, oh my God, this is like, that's a dead end. Basically, for a lot of people, the money, you're probably not going to recover that, right? So if somebody has those options and they know that like they had 10 transactions, 6 of them go to like exchanges and the bulk of the money is sitting and was maybe cashed out, or maybe there's more information that can be obtained from going to and asking those exchanges. There's 2 ways of doing it. It's like civil, right? So you can hire a lawyer and do it, or you can do it the cheap and slow way, which is going to law enforcement and hoping that they actually follow through. Right, but you don't have any control over what they do. You just kind of hope.
Do you work with Ellie in these cases often?
Yes,
you do.
Yeah, all the agents, all the major agencies we've worked with and have meetings with somewhat regularly, and it's really, I didn't have those connections like when I first started doing this work. I built those connections over years. One of the ways was I do compliance officer work at Coinstructive, right?
On the educational side?
No, I'm an actual fractional compliance officer for crypto financial institutions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, which is not everybody's favorite like thing when I tell them that, because they're like, oh, you're part of the bad guys because you want KYC, you want to know who everybody is. And I'm like, you know what? Everybody says that until like they get their crypto stolen, and then they want somebody to help them get it back. Right, so it is a give and take, and I'm not against privacy, right? That's not necessarily what the compliance officer's job is to avoid privacy. It's to avoid money laundering, and unfortunately, some of that means you have to dig in and ask more questions. But I think one of the beautiful things about doing both investigations and compliance work is it actually helps you prevent victims from happening at the financial institution side, because you see the victims on the investigation side and they tell you everything. But when the victims are being scammed, like in the scam, they're being coached, they're being told what to say, right? They're being told how to act, they're being told what to do, where to send them funds. They have all these answers already lined up. So you can start, if you know the patterns, because you've seen the victims tell you what's going to happen. When you talk to suspected victims that are in the middle of being scammed, you can start kind of giving them clues and pointers, and you can start predicting what's supposed to happen next. And like, oh, how did you know that's what he asked me to do? Well, it's because he asked everybody to do that, right? They always ask people to do that. And they're like, then it's like the light bulb starts to come on, and they're like, oh, uh-oh, what have I done? Right?
Do you ever find yourself in court testifying for cases?
I haven't had to go to court. But I have worked with some attorneys on cases that have helped them, like divorce cases or some of the stuff that we work on.
That seems extra sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Sometimes, like, it's not just about, like, I know my spouse has holdings. It's like they were taking money out of the bank, converting it to do
trying to
like
hide it.
Prostitutes and drugs and like having an alternate lifestyle outside of the house, right? And so financial proof, it's kind of like being a forensic accountant almost. Sure. So that's kind of like, oh, crypto blockchain forensics investigations. It's kind of just a fancy term for like new age forensic accounting.
Do you work with multiple chains? Is this UTXO specific, or do you work with multiple chains in this regard?
So the tools that we use have become more sophisticated over time, and so yes, there are different chains that we have access to, and the attribution on those chains depends on the tools that you use. So sometimes you can definitely tell like this is an exchange address, and sometimes you can't. Depending on the tools that you use. So not all the tools are perfect. It's why we use more than one tool when we do our investigation work, because we want to try to get it right.
Are you actually developing any of these tools?
No, there's a lot of players in the space that are building or are still building or perfecting their tools and have really cornered kind of the market on blockchain forensics. Now, we are building something to help work on the problem of generating like human readable reports. Right, because you can imagine the victim who like actually is somewhat crypto savvy and can go to a blockchain explorer, and there's public information. They can see that their money went to like a Binance wallet address. But then they walk into the police station, and they're just jibber jabbering at the police guy, and he's like, I don't know what you just said about any of the words, SegWit and this thing and the other thing and GXID, and I'm like, what are you talking about, sir? Yeah. And then the police officer starts asking him questions like it's a bank-related thing, and then the victim doesn't know what they're talking. So they're talking past each other. Yeah. Not only that, but when funds are found, part of the recovery process means you need a district attorney or an AUSA, like right, to sign, or a judge to sign off and say, yeah, go seize those assets and get them back. Those are stolen funds. But if all of the different blockchain forensics companies and all of the law enforcement institutions are all generating reports differently, then the people who are signing off on them, every time they get a report, they're like, oh shit, where am I looking? What am I supposed to sign off on? Right? This is kind of like, I equate this time to like DNA in the 80s. Right? DNA in the 80s was, you couldn't convict anybody on DNA because the jury was like, what the hell is DNA? But now, every podunk town has a DNA lab in it, and you don't have to send it off to like the FBI or some federal agency to do it for you. They all have it. They all know how to do it now. Yeah. This is how crypto will be in probably 10 more years, right? All the police stations, they will all have somebody that knows how to do it. They will all have access to the tools from the state level, right? And they'll all be like, whatever it is. But there will be people, because it's not going away. right? It's not going away. And I actually think that I'll have potentially less work over time, which I'm okay with. That means that more people are getting the help that they need, right? Which is why I've started a nonprofit to actually help victims of crypto fraud.
Talk about that if you would for a while.
Yeah, thanks. So the Crypto Recovery Alliance is very much an extension of what Coinstructive initially started doing with helping victims. But obviously, when you're starting out with a company, you can't just take on free cases because I'll also be broke.
You like to eat, right?
I do, yeah. It's nice to have a roof and be able to pay for food. So one of the biggest things I always wanted to do, like I said, was to help people. And so by creating the nonprofit, I think we can help a lot more victims, the ones who really need it, the ones who are financially destitute, because they, like the guy who loses or the woman who loses 75 grand is on a fixed income and is wondering how they're going to pay their rent. Like, they don't have money to spend for a blockchain forensics investigation that may or may not actually yield results, right?
So
and
it's
even
pro bono work, essentially?
Essentially, yeah. And so the goal, there's three things that the goal of the nonprofit, the Crypto Recovery Alliance, is going to do. It's provide free blockchain forensics investigation work for victims who qualify financially. And then everyone will get access to low or no cost mental health care services so that you can actually process the trauma.
The rehabilitation after the incident. Yeah.
Right, and fix all the drama and the trauma that you're experiencing. And then preventative education, right? So that whole recovery scam stuff, when you're being retargeted, because people don't realize that there's a scam list. Once you get on a scam list and you've been scammed, you get retargeted. If that company or the organization, whatever, organized crime organization, decided they're not going to get any more money out of you, you have given everything that you're going to give, they sell your information on the dark web to somebody else.
I'm pretty sure my mom is on most lists out there.
I think most of our moms are by now, probably. But one of the things is they don't care if it's 3 years down the road. If somebody who's living in Indonesia or a third world country who $300 a month is a good living and they get $1,500 out of you, that's like half a year.
Yeah.
They're like stoked.
Yeah.
Right? And it might not be that much to you and you might never report it. But the point, I think, is we have to get to the point where people are comfortable with being okay with reporting. Right? So many underreported cases in this industry is one of the reasons why it's not taken seriously, because the dollar amounts aren't adding up on the smaller side. In total, we're looking at over 2.2 or 2.4 billion last year.
Wow.
In losses in crypto.
Oh, that's significant. Is there a hotbed where you're seeing this scammer activity come from? I know, like with the phone scams, you can trace them, so many of them, back to Indian call centers. Is it like that, or?
Yeah, it is. It's so Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, even some of the Philippines, Laos, Thailand, that area. And also the problem with some of those, and people may have heard of pig butchering, which is the romance scam side of things.
Fattening them up so you can get as much,
right?
That's
as you can basically get. What it means, right? You fatten them up until you're like, oh, we got as much as we can get, and then you take them to slaughter, right? So, but there's another element to that people don't realize, because everybody thinks it's the good guys versus the bad guys, and there's a line in the sand. But what has turned out is that these organized crime units are human trafficking people partially into these call centers by offering fake jobs. And they're getting people to come in, take these jobs, and then they're basically being held as like indentured slaves. They take their passports, they take their phones, and they're forced to call and scam people.
Oh my God.
So you have victims scamming victims while you have the bad guys overseeing the work. So this is the world we live in now.
Horrific.
Yeah, it's like it almost makes it sickening to think like, hey, you have all this hate and disgust for like these scammers, and you realize some of them are victims.
Yeah.
Themselves being held against their will. And some of them are probably doing it because they know they're getting paid and they don't have a whole lot of options where they live.
Sure.
But some of them are being held against their will.
Can you speak, without sharing any sensitive information, of course, can you speak about any particular egregious case that you've worked on?
Well, there is one victim that we have been working with, and it's definitely a sad situation, and I'll tell you, the victim is disabled, deaf and mute, and got themselves into a romantic relationship online. Was married, had to get a divorce. He had cashed out all his 401k. The wife didn't realize what was going on until it was kind of too late. Started draining the bank account as well, right? She went to the bank. I'm not going to name the bank. Went to the bank and said, look, this is what's happening. We know this is happening. I want you to freeze the account so he can't wire money out. And they're like, it's a joint account. We can't stop him.
Oh, my God.
Well, they're suing the bank right now because obvious reasons.
Sure.
But point is, the lawyer that they were talking to advised the wife to divorce him so she could at least save the house. Because that's where they were going.
Wow.
Right? Well, now, his daughter, his full grown adult daughter, basically hates him. His wife is supporting him, but he's moved out of the house. They've gotten a divorce. He's moved out. He's already isolated because of his disabilities, because he's deaf and mute. That's already hard to communicate. So now, and I asked him on one of the calls a couple months ago, I said, one of the things I didn't ask you earlier was, have you had any suicidal thoughts? And the wife was on the call. She still would get on the call. They would meet together because she helps sign and translate. And right, he's really good at reading lips, but we do the kind of closed caption too. But she helps interpret and translate. And so she nudges him. And he basically said, yes, I have. And I told him, I said, do you know that there's a suicide prevention line or a number to call to talk to people who are deaf? And he's like, no, I didn't know that.
Wow.
Right? And so he was like thankful. All right. So the part of the goal of the nonprofit, right, is to help. If we can save one life, it's all worth it. Right?
Yeah, recovering crypto and saving lives.
So that's why I want to take back that word of the recovery scam. I want to take the word back, recovery. I want it to be a holistic thing. It's not just getting the recovery of the money. People are always like, oh, you recover the assets? I'm like, maybe. But I don't. A lot of times the funny part is the people over time actually care less about the money. They realize that the money, yes, meant a lot, but it didn't mean as much as the relationships, right? Or the other things in life that are important.
Sure.
Right? And that's the thing that that's really hard when you're working with these victims. It's just the devastation, right? And it's like the scammers don't care what happens that they leave in the wake. Right? They got their money, and for them, that's when it ended. And then all of the other bad stuff happened afterwards. Right? The wife actually lost her job because her job of 16 years or something, because she got so distracted and her performance had dropped off so much that they fired her.
Terrible. Total devastation of the household.
Yeah, the whole family got wrecked. Right? This is not just this is what I mean. You don't just get the money back and everything. Oh, we're a big happy family again.
Right. Horrific. Who is your competition and what sets you apart from them in this space?
So I want to say, there are some of the blockchain forensics companies that do investigation work, but we only do investigation work. So I think one of the things that sets us apart is that initial analysis, that two-step car repair analogy. Because if it's no good, we're not going to charge you to do all this extra work to generate a big old fancy report that you're not going to use because it all went overseas to and then went through a tumbler.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, right, what you're getting yourself into. So I think just being honest, right, and having a place for people to go to do, like we do 15-minute free consultations just so people understand like what the recovery process is like, what it's about, so they can be informed. Because if you're not informed, how can you make a decision, right? You're like, it's like making a decision in the dark.
Yeah.
So there are several good companies out in the space that are doing good work, but the nonprofit I'm excited about because there's nobody in the space doing that.
Are you going to be working on grants in this area or getting funding elsewhere?
So that's probably the number one. That's probably the most difficult part will be to get enough money to pay investigators to do the work. It seems like the blockchain forensics companies are pretty keen on donating tools to use, which is great. But I think it's really going to be for the wallet companies, the exchanges, the crypto-friendly banks, right, to step up and say, hey, we want to support this cause because we understand that we're part of the problem, right? The victims come back to the places where they were storing the coins or where they sent the coins from. Like, if I'm holding on an exchange and then I sent them to the scammer, I'm going to go back to the exchange and I'm going to be like, I got scammed. What do I do? And the exchanges be like, sorry, you're an idiot, but go to the police. And then the police are like, oh, sorry, we don't have the tools to do this yet. Go to the feds. And the feds are like, sorry, you lost 150 grand, but it's below our threshold to look at. Adios. If you lost this is not like I lost 5 grand or 50 bucks, right? Like 150 grand is not chump change. And no one's going to help you. Like, the human nature is not to be like, oh, well, I guess I learned a tough lesson. And then you just walk your hand and walk away. You're going to whip out your phone. You're going to get on the internet and you're going to be like, what do I do? How do I get help? Where do I recover my crypto? Then those recovery scam companies are all advertising, right? So it's just one thing after another. It's like constant bombardment of what to do and how to navigate this space, which is why free consultation, video call. You can see, look, there's a guy on LinkedIn that works for Coinstructive. I'm talking to him right now. Now, I know with AI and all these things, like we're getting to the age of where, I can't even trust
safe anywhere.
You can't trust the person you're even talking to on the phone, right?
Right.
Whether they're real or auto-generated of some
how we
kind.
know you're not a hologram, Chris?
I'm probably all are, actually.
Right. In the simulation.
It would explain a lot.
It would.
But yes, I'm really excited about working with the victims and getting that buy-in from the exchanges and those crypto financial institutions, because instead of saying, sorry, go to the police, they can say, sorry, go to the police, and here's a nonprofit company you can talk to that's not going to scam you.
That's great.
Right? And if they think there's value there, they can donate because we're the ones providing the services, which will actually maybe even alleviate their service of having to deal with the scam customers as much, right? They can actually provide them and just go, here you go, here's a place, go talk to these guys. They'll help take care of you.
So it's just a matter of time as crypto adoption continues that Coinstructive becomes a household name, is what you're saying. The more people using it, the more people are going to get scammed, unfortunately. Can you share the profit model? I know on the nonprofit side, obviously that's you've touched on that, but the profit model side, is it a portion of funds recovered or flat fee, or how does that work if somebody's procuring your services?
It's just like the mechanics. So we charge an hourly rate, and we're very transparent. That's why we do it in stages. So it's like, okay, it's going to take us, you did 6 transactions. Well, we know that's going to take us this amount of time. You did 30 transactions. Well, it's going to take us more time to look at, right? So it's time based. Okay. And we don't charge any percent of recovery fee unless you sign up for our post investigative services, which are usually somewhere between 0.5% to 2.5%. And that is only if you ever get funds recovered, and it happens about 5% of the time, which is industry standard for financial recovery losses.
And that's fair. Half to 2% is absolutely fair in that
A
scenario.
lot of companies are charging 10%
Wow.
or more
Wow.
on recovered assets.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to up those rates a bit.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why people like it. That's one of our differentiators, is that we're not here to try to make a lot of money off victims. Right?
Sure.
We make money so we can survive, right? But we're not like, most of the money, the profitable side of Coinstructive has always been the compliance side. Because think about it, like from a business model standpoint, victims are one-time users.
Yeah.
Like, you don't sell them another thing. They don't come back, hopefully.
You've not met my mom.
Somehow we got a repeat customer.
That's right. We do, unfortunately.
But right, they're one and done. So compliance customers, like pay every month, and they continue that services, right? So
that's the bulk of your. I mean,
that's the most of the revenue generation is on the compliance side, which basically I'm running the Department of Investigations almost like a nonprofit anyway. So might as well make a real nonprofit, and it's kind of just been a test bed all these years. But I enjoy doing the work. The work is fun. Like, actually, like, maybe not putting together reports, right? Which is, I can understand now why law enforcement gets such a bad rep, right? Because they do the investigation, but then they spend up a lot of time writing reports, right? Which is why I'm trying to build some software to help make writing reports even easier and generating reports easier. But the fun stuff is putting the dots together and connecting it. It's like a big puzzle.
Yeah.
Right. And I like logic stuff. So, and a lot of people do. You'd be surprised. Like, there's a lot of people who, you don't have to be an expert in crypto to learn crypto investigations. And I think that's a big misnomer. Like, you need to be an expert. You need to be technically really savvy. A lot of these things you kind of can learn as you go. Now it's getting more difficult because the scammers are getting a lot more sophisticated. But it's actually a really great place to learn.
I would imagine. You mentioned briefly some of the privacy coins or tumblers and mixers, you said. So if somebody's lost Monero or Zcash or Cash Fusion in the Bitcoin Cash space, is that a dead end automatically? Like, are you done with the case at that point? Is there nothing you can do?
Most of the time, yeah. There are some tools specifically for Monero. For tracing Monero. I know one of the
Does Monero know this?
I think so. One of the big blockchain forensics companies had a tool. And then there's another gentleman who worked for a Monero wallet who has come out with his own tool as well. Now, my understanding is that Monero tracing only works going forward. And most of those tools have only been available to law enforcement. So I wouldn't be able to trace Monero.
Gotcha.
Which is probably for the best, because it's supposed to be privacy coin, right?
Right.
So, and and I like Zcash. I like the Zcash project. They just came and spoke at our San Diego Bitcoin meetup, our San Diego meetup, which was originally the original Bitcoin meetup group. But the privacy issue really boils down to government intervention, right? It's that problem that they have with it, right? Because they don't have any control. They can't see.
Right.
And part of it is because it's not, when I say government, it's that banking rail, right? It's the where is that exchange, or where are they doing their conversions, because they're still playing in the dollar space.
Sure.
So imagine being a financial institution selling Monero. How is your bank going to be comfortable with you selling that when they know that people use it for scams and child pornography and like all kinds of bad stuff, as well as just privacy, which is why I like privacy coins, because cash is pretty private, right? I mean, other than the camera in the store,
right?
Right, but like that's a thing that we're missing with crypto. When those guys came last week, one of the developers said, I don't want my paycheck to be public on chain. There's a company in San Diego that pays their employees in Bitcoin.
Wow.
Which means it's on chain. If you start to figure out addresses and people, and it starts to all unravel,
Sure.
right? And then the IRS is like, oh, are you really paying your taxes? Because you got paid in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right? Like, how is it all working, right? So privacy is very important. And I think people should have a healthy understanding of what's actually being seen by what wallet companies are actually providing to the blockchain forensics companies. And I learned recently that like even blockchain explorer companies, like you go online, you look at blockchain explorer, they're selling logs to the blockchain forensics companies.
Wow.
You go and you look up a wallet address, like if you look up your own wallet address, right, and you have an IP that you logged into the site, they can start to make connections. Like, why did this IP address? No one's ever looked up this wallet address before. This one IP address looks up this one wallet address. Maybe it's theirs.
I'd argue that they don't have a wallet. In my definition, the term wallet infers non-custodial. I'd say they have an account somewhere.
Yeah, non-custodial.
Yeah, and I think that would be the big difference there, because if it's non-custodial, they don't have the ability to share that information with anyone. Where if it's custodial, it's not really a wallet; it's an account that
Correct.
they can share that information everywhere, and that's a very clear distinction. I guess the point there is with great freedom comes great responsibility, and if you're going to play in that privacy coin space, you better know what you're doing, because the chance of recovering something from even Coinstructive's work is slim to none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, that's why custody, I think, is an important problem to solve, right? Because a bulk of the users probably don't have the capacity to control their own keys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and they probably shouldn't. To be honest with you, there's a lot of people who probably shouldn't control their own keys, because they will. They'll screw something up.
Yeah. There's definitely many points of failure in the process at this stage in the game, and you do need to know what you're doing. But,
Gotta love multi-sig.
Yeah.
I do like multi-sig.
Yeah. You touched a bit on the governmental aspects here. So I understand that you have been involved in the legislative aspect of crypto or bills or something loosely.
Yeah, that's almost a whole nother podcast. But when I first got into crypto back in 2016, earlier, but in 2016, I helped build a set of like principles for virtual currency businesses. And that was with a group called Consumer Research out of Washington, D.C., which then led to template law by the Uniform Law Commission for the Virtual Currencies Businesses Act, which basically was like a regulation around money transmitter licensing and excuse me, pardon me, money transmitter licensing regulations and how to get a license, basically, and so they made it pretty difficult to do so, and so the important thing is that like that was one of the reasons why Bitcoin ATM companies did not have to have a license right away. It was part of that legislation, and I was in that space, so I feel like I really did help move that along. But I also felt like, regardless of whether Coinstructive survived or failed, you can always fall back on legislative and policy work, because I can say no matter what, regardless of whether my business models worked, maybe I wasn't a great businessman, but I wanted to do something that moved the industry forward. And you don't have to be a politician. You don't have to be a lawyer, right? You don't have to be even super educated. You can be just a regular Joe and show up and have your voice heard, right? And so that's what I tried to do, is like, I'm going to try to make a stance somewhere in this legislative field so that the politicians don't screw it up and the legislators don't make extra bad laws, right? You can't fix every of them. But like was it last year? I think it was last year, maybe the year before. I testified in California against the California kiosk bill,
wow,
which ended up passing anyway. But I got up there, I gave them my 2 minutes, and they asked me a question, and I answered what they did. But end of the day, in California now, you can only do $1,000 a day per person at a Bitcoin ATM.
Wow.
So they've killed that industry.
Yeah, a few instances come to mind. I don't know if you're familiar with Ian Freeman. Mm-hmm. Can you give your insight or explain some nuance there in that situation specifically? From what I understand, he may have been poking the bear a little bit in what he was doing with those ATMs, but I don't know all of the ins and outs of that specific scenario. I just know he's in jail for like 8 years, I believe, for money transmitting without proper licensing and permits. So
I don't know. So I'm not going to comment because I don't know the whole story. But there was a gentleman in San Diego who went to jail for money laundering, and he was an unregistered MSB, with money service business. Did never register with FinCEN. Literally, it's a form you fill out. Doesn't cost a dime. You just have to fill out the form and send it in and be like, I'm a financial institution. That's registering. That's it. And then they give you a number. Like 3 days later, here's your number.
And failure to do that.
That's enough if you're selling crypto and it's more than 50 grand in a year. They can get you for not having a license to do that. And so, yeah, you can go to jail for money laundering. So this kid was living in TJ. His mom was like Mexican, I believe, and he had like dual citizen. So he was going back and forth, and they got him on international money laundering.
Whole different can of worms.
Another level, right? Because he was going back and forth across the border.
Wow.
He ended up spending his 21st birthday in jail, right? Like 3 years. And it all could have been avoided with a little bit of understanding of the compliance world. And it wasn't necessarily like that they targeted him specifically. It was one of his customers got rolled up in an investigation, and then they're like, well, what are you doing with your cash? Like, oh, I'm buying Bitcoin. Well, where? Oh, this dude. So now then they go, look at that guy, right? It's like the
domino effect.
Yeah, right. So, and it's probably something similar, right? Like I didn't check the right box. They're wanting to make an example, Yeah,
a lot of those sad stories out there like that, whether it's right or not, if you don't jump through the hoops properly, they can very easily make an example out of you.
Right. That's when you play in the banking realm.
Yep.
They don't mess around.
Nope.
I mean, this is like Caitlin Long in the Custodia Bank battle, right? Like, I've been supporting her in that battle for a long time because banking is so corrupt.
Yeah.
Right. This is why it's so important that Bitcoin exists.
Yep.
Right. It's not necessarily people thought when we first got into those first conferences, it was, there was 3 kinds of people basically. It was the crypto anarchists, right? Destroy the whole anarcho-capitalists, right?
Burn it all down.
And they're like, in the next 5 years, it's going to be only Bitcoin. Yeah. I was like, well, that's not happening. I can see it's going to take longer than that. And then it was the developers who were building stuff. And then it was the lawyers who were trying to keep everybody from going to jail. Yeah. And I gravitated to the lawyers. And so that's kind of part of how, now I get a lot of free advice. It's a good move. Become friends with lawyers.
That's right. I've had to learn that the hard way myself a few times, but
we're almost at an hour.
Okay. If you want to just kind of take us out here. First, fun question: what's your biggest win? What's your biggest recovery at Coinstructive?
The biggest recovery we've gotten, 115K back.
Wow.
Which was 98% or 95, well, yeah, like closer to 98% of what he lost.
Did the scammer, was the scammer caught, or was there any repercussion there?
I don't think that there has been the scammer has been caught. We did another case where the scammer was already apprehended, but they didn't know that they were also involved in crypto. So we like unlocked a whole nother door for them.
Wow.
And so that case hasn't actually been completely resolved yet. But they have several millions of dollars, and everybody's getting money back. So
Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Can I throw in a question for you guys?
Yeah.
Steven, just give you one break. This is just for the soundbite, so I'll cut it out. Just because this is for the non-pros in the group, and I could just cut it into the trailer. If you have, let's say, just 2 rules for life of how not to be scammed in this area, can you summarize anything for like let's say the older generations out there? Do you have anything that you tell people that are potential or being scammed or something, just some general rules to look out for, or can you just, for our soundbite purposes?
So 2 main things that I think will really help people avoid scams is avoid taking the conversation to a private chat platform. Keep that conversation where it was, right? There's no reason to go to a WhatsApp or a Telegram. And then I would say the second thing that's probably the second most important thing is don't send money anywhere, right? Like if it sounds like you're gonna like make money and it sounds too good to be true, it honestly, it probably is, right? There is no free money. So, and if you really don't know, third piece, I'll just give you this little nugget, ask somebody before you do it, right? It only takes, most people are like, oh, I'll just do it. This is and they always want to pressure you to do it now. If you take your time and step back and think about it, you'll probably have a realization that maybe something ain't quite right here.
Do you, are you familiar with the OneCoin scam that went around about, I have a colleague that lost close to 200 grand in that scam over about a 18-month period.
Yeah, I actually know a guy who was doing kind of solo investigation work on that. Put a lot of material together and really kind of like put it on his own shoulders to like expose a lot of that, and worked on that for several years. So
wow. I tried to warn this individual multiple times.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't listen. So they paid dearly.
Well, I mean, it's weird because some of these billion-dollar scams, right, get through the public and become actual, like, our project-based. Like, let's say, like an EOS.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how do you raise, like, $4-point-something billion for a project, and then they got, like, a small slap on the wrist, something like a couple $1 million fine?
Yeah.
But that project's garbage now.
Yeah.
Right? It's not doing anything. It's like the same thing as OneCoin.
I don't even think that was a legitimate blockchain at all. They just used all of the verbiage and nomenclature there, and we're just taking people's fiat. That's all
what I
doing.
mean. But how does one become like a scam and the other one they get away with?
Yeah,
right?
True.
It's a very fine line.
Yep.
It's like, well, we paid a lot more lawyers.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I really don't know what the difference is these days. It seems like, and most people now realize that you can just get away with stuff and they'll just slap you on the wrist. And if you made, was it 20? They got like a $21 million fine or something. Wow. $4 billion.
Drop in the bucket.
Nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Give us your socials, how people can reach you. What's the best way to procure your services?
I thought you were going to say give us your social security number.
Yes, all of that as well. And your seed phrase, please.
Seed phrases, social security number.
That's right.
So you can find me pretty much on all social media at DJ Kinkle, Kinkle.
Oh, we got to know the backstory there.
I was a DJ in college, and then I was my Twitter handle because I thought, well, no one's ever going to use Twitter, and then it's stuck. And so now that's just me everywhere.
All
right. But yeah, that's you can. I'm on pretty much all the social media channels except for TikTok. So, but yeah, you can find me pretty much everywhere, and coinstructive.com in case you want to go and open a case, fill out a survey, and get a free 15-minute consultation. And I highly recommend checking out the Crypto Recovery Alliance, so cryptorecoveryalliance.org. If you want to find out more information about the nonprofit, or you want to contact us about helping to support the nonprofit as a volunteer or a donor, or put yourself in the queue in case we're ready to start taking cases sooner than we think, and we might be able to provide some services for you.
Are you just waiting for the paperwork to process on the nonprofit?
Partially, and just getting all the infrastructure in the back-end infrastructure in place in order to actually be able to handle the victims as they come in. Because once you open the floodgates, the last thing you really want to do is like shut the doors and be like, oh, we got too many victims, right? So want to make sure that when we do open the doors that we're not overwhelmed and flooded.
You're ready.
So that we can handle the work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Chris. Really,
Thanks,
really
Steve.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it too.
All right.
Friend, cause burning my life to a crisp is something no one else living can revoke or rescind. When there's nothing else left, the Persians consume the Greeks. So let the sun rise and I'll fly on my wings.